Welcome to Burning Bright, a weekly podcast presenting poetry and prose from Passager. On the night of October 8th, 1871, a fire started on DeKoven Street in Chicago, or somewhere nearby. Firefighters got it under control 2 days later, but by then it had burned 3.5 square miles of the city, destroyed over 17,000 structures, killed about 300 people, and left over 100,000 people homeless. Legend has it that the fire started when Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern. But whether it was that, some men that were drinking and gambling in the barn, or something else, the cause was never officially determined. To commemorate the 153rd anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire, 3 poems by Passager writers who live in Chicago. Passager just published its 2024 Poetry Contest issue. Our first poem on this episode is from Passager's 2019 Poetry Contest issue. Chicago and Ruth Goring said that when she wrote her poem Textiles, she was working on collage art using fabrics, threads, twine, along with tiles, handmade paper, wood pieces, and other odd objects. She said, "I was struck by the parallels between stitching and writing and living, and so this poem emerged from painstaking physical work of sewing and embroidering." The lake is a sheet of jade under a sheet of clouds. The air settles, alert as a watching animal. You go still to hear blood buzzing in your skull. Then wind rises. Its fingers rustle leaves. Colors speak from white, words from silence. You rock on haunches, folding language over itself. Sentences are seams that pierce and hold the garments of your life. You rise and twirl this skirt, stitched of that sky-blue dress when you were 7. The river falling over rocks, the eggs you found in dark edges of the shed. The rope you jumped with sisters, notebooks you filled, songs you learned. A friend texts from another continent to ask if God will hear her prayers for animals. A calf on her farm is sick. Before you can answer, he dies. How to weave the boy in a square of darkness, his grandmother's backyard, felled by a storm of police bullets. What of the swallowing of islands, the bartered girls? Some of your seams cut back and forth, make drunken paths, then fold into long arcs, miracles of mending. You set yellow beside sadness. You stitch with words into the silence that holds everything. Ruth Goring's poem Textiles. Ruth said the poem was part of her ongoing quest to hold joy and beauty in the context of personal and social pain. Patricia McMillen wrote a series of what she called Mrs. God poems. She said, "I started them during my second marriage as I tried to imagine the feminine consort of what then seemed to me a very masculine, imperfect, even needy divinity. She quickly demanded Mrs. Buddha as a best friend to distract her from endless housework, not to mention stepmothering a rather indulged only son." Here's Patricia's poem, Wu Ji. Mrs. Buddha says it's where yin and yang collide, a place of rest, balance. Nothing, everything needed is Wu Ji. White crane spreading her wings, Wu Ji. Bob's your uncle, Wu Ji. Mrs. God sips tea, says nothing. Wu Ji. Gazing beyond the railing of the porch, we watch the dead line up. One man in starched white shirt, black sweater, pants, white leather shoes. His wife beside him, dressed identically. Meredith holding hands with Jane, who did most of the driving, until Meredith, last week, crashed their Mazda to smithereens. A menopausal woman in a Bob Marley t-shirt. Her adult son, slight, wearing a brown hoodie. Each of them, Wu Ji, as evening falls, not quite wabi-sabi, though similar. as though having waked slightly off balance, lacking yang or yin. From Passager's 2021 Poetry Contest issue, Wu Ji by Chicagoan Patricia McMillen. The first poem on this episode of Burning Bright was by Chicagoan Ruth Goring from Passager's 2019 Poetry Contest issue. This next poem is also from the 2019 Poetry Contest issue, also by a Chicagoan named Ruth. Ruth Hoberman said, "After 33 years of marriage, my husband and I are glad to be together as we grow old, but continually surprised by how peculiar the process is. When he took his first art class a few years ago, I was amazed by the intensity of his concentration and the accuracy and beauty of his drawing. Art class for adults took shape as I watched him sketch. My husband is drawing his shoes. He learned in class about cubes and cones, spheres and shadows. Now aglets, laces, insole, heel appear, meticulous, solid, suspended mid-air on his easel. We're not accustomed to aging. Past decades went by with such cheerful, inconsequential waves. Now my friends have bad bones, canes, sick spouses, and my own has turned introspective as a tulip, tight wrapped around darkness. Or graphite, the black dust he draws over textured paper, then feathers with a thumb, shaping shadow and light till images emerge, like a photograph rising from a chemical bath. I think of Venus on her half-shell, but Whitman is more apt, bequeathing himself to the dirt he loved. Look for me under your boot soles, he said. Now he waits under the second shoe, the one my husband hasn't finished yet. Ruth Hoberman's poem, Art Class for Adults. Ruth said her husband's still taking art classes and continuing to improve, but still hasn't finished that second shoe. You can subscribe to and learn more about Passager and its commitment to writers over 50 at PassagerBooks.com. Passager offers a 25% discount on the books and journal issues featured here on Burning Bright. Visit our website to see what's on sale this week. For Kendra, Mary, Christine, Roseanne, and the rest of the Passager staff, I'm John Shore.